When my daughter-in-law moved my place card and handed my front row seat to her own mother, I didn't cry, I didn't argue, and I didn't beg for respect. I simply walked to the back of the room, opened my purse, and lightly touched the signed loan agreement that had made her beautiful new house possible in the first place. I stared down at the beautifully printed place card in front of me, my name embossed in elegant gold lettering. Right underneath it, my daughter-in-law, Clara, had decided to print the word donor in parentheses as if I weren't an actual member of the family, but rather some anonymous foundation or a walking, talking ATM. Before I could even pull out my chair to sit down, Clara swooped in with a chilly, practiced smile. Without saying a single word, she snatched my place card off the table in the front row and handed it directly to her own mother, Evelyn. For me, the only seat left for the evening was a flimsy, uncomfortable metal folding chair tucked away in the absolute furthest corner of the banquet hall. It was positioned right next to the swinging kitchen doors, where waiters rushed in and out every few seconds in a chaotic blur. Julian, my own son, stood right there beside them. He just stared guiltily at the floor, adjusting his tie, and didn't utter a single syllable to defend me against this blatant humiliation. This was the grand, over-the-top party celebrating the grand opening of their brand new home, a beautiful, sprawling colonial in a wealthy suburb of Boston. A house that never would have existed without my decades of hard-earned savings and my massive financial backing. They clearly saw me as nothing more than a convenient cash machine with a pulse. But at that exact moment, they had absolutely no idea that tucked inside my handbag was an official document capable of ruining their entire celebration in a heartbeat. Instead of making a scene, throwing a tantrum, or breaking down into hurt tears, I sat down quietly on my assigned wobbly chair and held my head high. I watched the loud, vibrant crowd fill the brightly lit room while Evelyn proudly took the seat of honor, soaking up compliments from the guests for a house she hadn't contributed a dime to. Every now and then, Clara would cast a triumphant smirk in my direction, utterly convinced that I would do what I always did, quietly submit and swallow my pride. For the past 2 years, I had been transferring substantial amounts from my personal accounts every single month just to hand Julian and his family this luxurious lifestyle on a silver platter. But this shameless disrespect was the absolute final straw when the festivities reached their loudest peak late that evening. I slipped out of the party completely unnoticed through a side exit and took a quiet Uber back home. My haven was a cozy, meticulously kept 2-bedroom apartment on the quieter edge of town, a place I had lived in alone since my dear husband suddenly passed away and which I always kept spotless. By 7 a.m. the next morning, I was already sitting at my wooden kitchen table, drinking a mug of strong black coffee and opening my laptop with steady, deliberate movements. I logged into my online banking portals and printed out every single bank statement from the past 24 months, clean and complete. The raw numbers on the bright screen didn't lie. It totaled exactly $150,000, an amount I had explicitly declared and legally secured as an interest-free loan for their house construction. Clara and Julian, in their boundless entitlement, had apparently assumed this was just an advance on their inheritance, a massive gift that required absolutely no reciprocity, gratitude, or basic respect. What they forgot was that during the initial signing at the notary's office, I had insisted on inserting a very specific, airtight recall clause into that private loan agreement. It wasn't tied to any complicated legal loopholes or lengthy court proceedings. It stated, plain and simple, that if there was a gross neglect of basic familial obligations, the entire sum had to be repaid in full within exactly 30 days. No exceptions. I reread the document carefully and drafted a brief, strictly formal letter announcing the immediate termination of the loan. There were no emotional accusations, no bitter rants, just pure, undeniable facts, printed in black and white right in front of me. As I penned my signature at the bottom of the page, I pictured Clara's arrogant smirk from the night before and felt a cold, calm smile cross my face. Julian tried calling me later that morning to offer a half-hearted, clumsy apology, but I cut the conversation short after a few seconds. Remaining polite but entirely unyielding, I packed the letter into a crisp envelope. My entire body was filled with a deep, unshakable determination. On Monday afternoon, I drove out to my son's new house while the two of them were at work, and the kids were stuck in their after-school programs. Ever since the family moved in, I had possessed my own house key under the guise of being able to check on the place in an emergency or sign for deliveries. In reality, over the last few months, I had mostly used that key to slip in before they got off work and handle their entire household chores entirely uncompensated. I walked slowly through the modern, open-concept rooms, which were furnished with high-end designer pieces, a massive portion of which had been financed directly out of my pocket. The expensive granite kitchen island was covered in a chaotic mess of dishes from the weekend. Unwashed coffee mugs and unopened past-due notices were piled high on the countertop. On this day, I didn't clean a single thing, I didn't wash a single glass, and I didn't make their messy bed upstream in the master bedroom like I usually did. Instead, I placed my prepared, formal, certified letter right in the center of the clean island, standing it up directly next to Clara's beloved, high-end espresso machine, right beside it. I unhooked my silver house key from my keychain with a firm, decisive click and let it drop heavily onto the smooth stone surface. I wanted absolutely no access to a home built on a foundation of deep ingratitude, selfishness, and a complete lack of respect for me as I walked off the property. I didn't feel a shred of anger or bitter grief. Instead, an unexpected, incredibly liberating wave of relief washed over me, taking my breath away. I pulled the front door shut quietly but firmly behind me, knowing with absolute certainty that the click of the lock signaled the end of an era in our family. The real, deep shift in our family dynamics was officially underway, and I was stepping forward without a single doubt. I didn't need to do their unpaid labor to feel valuable anymore. My worth wasn't dependent on their superficial approval. Tomorrow, their entire world was going to look very different. The inevitable storm hit at exactly 7 p.m. that evening, the moment my phone began to vibrate violently against the wooden coffee table. Julian tried reaching me first, calling several times in a desperate panic, but after 3 failed attempts, he finally gave up. Seconds later, Clara's familiar number lit up the screen. I let the phone ring out in total tranquility until it rolled over to voicemail. And then I flipped the entire device to silent for the rest of the night. I had absolutely no intention of getting dragged into endless, exhausting, screaming matches over the phone where people would just yell, threaten, or fake tears. Instead, I walked purposefully into my entryway and replaced the deadbolt on my own front door using a simple screwdriver and a brand new lock cylinder I had bought earlier. The spare key Julian kept for emergencies was officially rendered completely useless, and I single-handedly re-established my own security and privacy. I wanted to guarantee that no one could blindside me by bursting into my home to hurl emotional guilt trips or try to manipulate me with hollow promises. Once the work was done, I curled up in my favorite armchair with a gripping book and basked in the utterly unfamiliar, beautiful silence of the evening. For years, my life had consisted almost entirely of sacrifices and obligations for other people, and I was breaking those invisible chains link by link. The next morning, I walked straight into my local bank branch and revoked the automatic transfer authorization for the joint savings account I had set up for my grandkids' future. The monthly, generous contributions were stopped instantly, and I moved the entire existing balance into a new, heavily protected high-yield certificate of deposit that sat exclusively under my own name. I wasn't acting out of blind vengeance. I was merely enforcing the logical, sober consequences of their own disrespectful behavior. The ball was now entirely in their court. Thank you for spending your time with Quiet Revenge. Every story we share is carefully selected, researched, edited, reviewed, and produced by our team because we believe stories of family, resilience, and quiet justice deserve thoughtful care. We also want to be transparent. AI tools may assist with certain parts of our creative workflow, but every story is guided, checked, and shaped by real people before it reaches you. Because our channel's monetization is currently unavailable, your support helps us continue creating these stories for this wonderful community. If these videos have ever comforted, inspired, or encouraged you, please consider supporting Quiet Revenge with the price of a small cup of coffee. Patreon, https://www.patreon.com/Quiet Revenge Family. Ko-fi, https://ko-fi.com/Thestry Family. PayPal, https://www.paypal.com/baypalme/kunhwangmin. Thank you for being part of our journey. 2 agonizingly long days crawled by before my son, Julian, finally showed up unannounced at my building, frantically buzzing my apartment intercom, since his old key no longer worked at the main entrance. He was left rattling the handle and calling my name through the speaker. I opened my first-floor window, looked down at my visibly shaken son, and politely asked him to wait out by the front gate. I walked down the stairs slowly, cracked the heavy wooden entry door just a few inches, and looked him straight in his anxious eyes. He was clutching the printed, signed letter in his trembling hand, his fingers twitching slightly, his face completely pale. "Mom, what is the meaning of this? We can't possibly come up with this kind of cash in 30 days. You know that," he stammered, his voice laced with desperation. I countered him with a calm, unyielding voice, stating that the contract we both signed explicitly laid out that exact time frame. He immediately tried to shift the entire blame onto Clara's poor planning, calling the incident at the housewarming party a stupid misunderstanding and promising things would change. I listened to his long-winded excuses patiently, but I could see right through them. His words weren't born from genuine remorse, but from sheer financial terror. "You sat me on a cheap metal folding chair next to the kitchen garbage and labeled me as a donor on your tables," I said, entirely matter of fact. "That wasn't a misunderstanding. Julian, that was your honest, unvarnished opinion of me. And as of today, I accept that reality completely. I slowly pulled the door closed in front of him, feeling stronger than I ever had in my entire life. The real, unmerciful reality of adulthood was finally crashing down on them and their superficial lifestyle. They needed to learn to take responsibility for their own actions instead of using me as a convenient scapegoat and an endless bank account. I walked back upstairs to my warm living room and finished my coffee in total peace. Over the next few days, I radically overhauled my daily routine and canceled every single unpaid service the family had taken for granted. Under normal circumstances, every Thursday afternoon, I would drive out to pick up my 2 grandkids from preschool, cook them a hot dinner, and patiently help them with their activities. Instead, on a whim, I booked a 3-week vacation out in Cape Cod, a coastal getaway I had dreamed about for years, but had constantly put off due to a chronic lack of time. When Clara sent me a blunt text on Wednesday morning, casually reminding me of the pickup schedule, I replied with equal brevity. I wrote back entirely factually, informing her that moving forward, I would no longer be available for childcare or house maintenance, and that they would need to make other arrangements. The digital backlash didn't take long. My phone lit up with a barrage of texts filled with outrage over my sudden selfishness, coldness, and lack of family loyalty. I read the angry walls of text on the screen, deleted them instantly without replying, and didn't feel even a microscopic twinge of guilt. My own son and his demanding wife desperately needed to learn that family support is not a one-way street, meant to be exploited at will. They had crossed the clear boundaries of human respect, and now they had to carry the practical weight of their actions in their stressful daily lives. I packed my suitcase in total tranquility, bought a few new novels for the beach, and watered the bright flowers on my balcony. The incredible feeling of finally owning my own time again was indescribably precious, filling my chest with deep satisfaction. I was genuinely looking forward to the ocean, the sound of the waves, and the absolute freedom waiting for me. No one was going to call me to demand things or burden me with chores. I was finally the main character in my own life again. While I was soaking up the crisp, salty air out on Cape Cod, things back home were unraveling drastically, according to a few updates I received from a mutual friend, in a state of total desperation. Clara had tried to draft her own mother, Evelyn, to help with the daily, grueling routine of driving the kids around and managing the chaotic house. But Evelyn, who loved sitting in the front row and being pampered, had absolutely no intention of sacrificing her own leisure time for hard, unpaid labor. According to my friend, furious arguments had broken out between the two women as the comfortable, seamless lifestyle they took for granted completely collapsed. Julian was ultimately forced to scale back his billable hours at his firm to bridge the gap, leading to a noticeable dip in their income and immense friction with his senior partners. Meanwhile, the merciless 30-day countdown for the full repayment of the $150,000 loan was ticking away into single digits. They tried calling my cell phone dozens of times every day, but I had firmly blocked their numbers for the duration of my trip to protect my peace of mind. I spent my sunny days taking long, restorative walks along the wide sandy shore, reading, and enjoying lovely conversations with the other guests at the inn. I could actively feel the chronic tension of the last few years lifting off my shoulders, my energy finally returning. The cold financial reality was about to hit my son and his wife, and they had to learn to survive without relying on my hard-earned money. I had helped them more than enough in the past, and every single dollar had been repaid with deep ingratitude. An era that was now permanently over when I returned to my apartment 3 weeks later, fully rested and recharged. A thick stack of mail was waiting for me on the entryway table. I looked at the envelopes with total composure. I felt strong, steady, and completely prepared for the fallout. Nestled inside that mountain of mail was an official, certified letter from a major national bank, sent to me via registered mail by Julian and Clara. Unable to produce that massive amount of cash on short notice, they had been forced to heavily refinance and take out a steep second mortgage on their brand new home. They had to take on a high-interest loan just to wire my full $150,000 back into my checking account before the deadline expired. A quick glance at my online banking profile confirmed the successful transfer. The entire sum was back under my complete control, safe and sound, by taking out that secondary debt under terrible market conditions. Their disposable income for the next few decades was going to be severely, painfully restricted. The lavish lifestyle Clara loved to flaunt all over social media was gone with a single click, a thing of the past. That very evening, Julian knocked on my door. He was entirely alone this time, without his wife. And he looked visibly older, the stress weighing heavily on his face. He didn't ask for money or beg for an extension anymore. Instead, he just asked in a quiet, defeated voice if we could just sit down and talk like normal people. I politely invited him in, offered him a seat at the kitchen table, and brewed us a pot of herbal tea, just like the old days. There were no loud recriminations on my part, no tears, and no dramatic scenes, just a completely calm, business-like atmosphere. I explained to him softly that this clean break between family and finances was the healthiest thing for our future relationship, and that I wouldn't be backing down. He nodded sorrowfully, stared at the floor, and left my apartment a few minutes later without another word. As I washed out the empty mugs, I took a deep breath and felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Justice didn't need to be loud. It just required standing your ground. The following afternoon, I sent a text proposing a meeting on neutral ground to establish our boundaries moving forward, leaving absolutely no room for ambiguity. We met up at a quiet, traditional bistro downtown, and to my surprise, Julian had brought Clara along with him. She was unrecognizable, her usual arrogant, condescending tone was entirely gone, and she could barely bring herself to look me in the eye as we sat across from each other. I slid a fresh, typed agreement across the table, a document I had carefully drafted using a standard family mediator template to govern our relationship from then on. The terms were crystal clear. There would be absolutely zero financial handouts from me moving forward, for any occasion whatsoever. Holidays and family visits were restricted to a fixed schedule each month, and any form of unpaid domestic help or last-minute babysitting was permanently off the table. If they wanted to bring my grandkids over to visit, it had to be arranged well in advance and solely for the purpose of spending quality time with me, never as a convenience or a free daycare service. Clara signed the paper without a single word of protest, knowing full well she had lost every single ounce of leverage she ever had over me. Julian signed right after her with a shaky hand, whispering a quiet thank you that I hadn't cut them out of my life entirely. I took the signed contract, slipped it into my purse, and paid the entire lunch bill myself. I wanted to show them, unmistakably, that I was entirely independent and didn't owe them or need them for anything. As we walked out of the restaurant, we exchanged a cool but respectful handshake, sealing our new boundaries. It was finally over, and a massive weight rolled off my shoulders. A new chapter of my life was beginning, entirely free from exploitation, and I was proud of myself for not bending. A full 6 months have passed since those chaotic weeks, and my life has transformed in the most wonderful ways imaginable. I've been using that recovered money strictly on myself, traveling, taking weekend trips, and regularly buying tickets to Broadway shows in the city. I even redecorated a portion of my apartment, tailoring it entirely to my own personal taste without ever having to care about anyone else's opinion. Julian calls me like clockwork once a week now, and our conversations, though brief, are anchored in genuine respect. The grandkids come over to stay with me on occasional weekends, and we have a truly wonderful time together because it's entirely on my terms and never feels like grueling labor. As for Clara, I barely hear a peep from her, which has granted me a deep, beautiful sense of inner peace and tranquility in my day-to-day life. Her dream of living a high life funded by my retirement accounts has officially popped, and they are learning to live within their actual means. We didn't force some fake, fairy tale family reconciliation, nor did we rush into a messy emotional truce. Instead, we found a healthy, distant baseline that works perfectly for everyone involved. I often find myself sitting out on my sunny balcony in the evenings, pouring a good glass of Pinot Noir and looking out over the city lights below. I am so deeply proud of the choice I made while sitting on that hard metal folding chair. I took a stand, acted decisively, and proved that you should never underestimate a woman who knows her worth. My dignity isn't up for sale. I am, finally, completely free, happy, and at peace with my choices. The past made me resilient. The present is beautiful, and the future belongs entirely to me. Everything is exactly as it should be. Thank you for spending your time with Quiet Revenge. Every story we share is carefully selected, researched, edited, reviewed, and produced by our team because we believe stories of family, resilience, and quiet justice deserve thoughtful care. We also want to be transparent. AI tools may assist with certain parts of our creative workflow, but every story is guided, checked, and shaped by real people before it reaches you. Because our channel's monetization is currently unavailable, your support helps us continue creating these stories for this wonderful community. If these videos have ever comforted, inspired, or encouraged you, please consider supporting Quiet Revenge with the price of a small cup of coffee. Patreon, https://www.patreon.com/Quiet Revenge Family. Ko-fi, https://ko-fi.com/Thestry Family. PayPal, https://www.paypal.com/Bapalm/Kunhongmin. Thank you for being part of our journey.